Hello. Oh my gosh. I am so excited about this live for two reasons. One, I haven't gone live in years, actually. It's been a while since I've gone live on YouTube. And also because I love talking about the creative process and kind of figuring out how things work. And so I have been doing this podcast called Create for No Reason for the past year and a half. And I kept saying that I wanted to live stream the show because people are using YouTube more to live stream. And I thought, okay, I can do that. I can figure it out, right? And so today I had an interview scheduled with my friend Terrance, my new friend Terrance, and I reached out to him and said, hey, would you mind going live with me on YouTube? And it's such the essence of the show, Create for No Reason, because it's all about just pursuing your creativity, pursuing your passions, doing more of what brings you joy. And this, to me, I thought would be really fun as a fun little exercise in creativity, a fun thing to kind of try something new, do something new and see if it works. And I'm using a little bit of technology to do it and play around with it. So that's what I'm doing today on this show, on this video. And I'm really excited to introduce you. So this is really a YouTube video version of what I will turn into the podcast over on Create for No Reason. So you can check it out over there as well. I am so excited to dig into this conversation because I was introduced to like I said, my new friend, Terrance Elmore. He is an author, a poet, a podcaster, and he says that he's doing his part to spread love in a world that seems to be full of hate, one poem and podcast at a time. And I just think that is such a beautiful sentiment. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to Terrance and for all of you to not only meet him, but talk about the creative process, writing, poetry, podcasting, all the things. And so I am excited to bring Terrance on. Terrance, so excited to see you.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
This is such a fun, first of all, I have to say thank you for live streaming the show with me.
Oh, no problem.
I appreciate you being so flexible and doing
Hey,
this. Not everybody would do it.
hey, it's the only way you're going to find out if it works or not, or if you like it, if you go ahead and do it. And I'm honored to be the person you try it with.
Aw, you're so great. So I'm excited. So we met from a friend of ours, our friend Adam, who is also a podcaster. And
Yes.
he connected us. And actually, it was so fun because Terrance and I were just talking before we popped on and said that so Terrance, you said that you actually we've connected on Clubhouse, but we've never actually had a conversation.
Right. It's the weirdest thing on Breakfast with Champions. Sometimes we're in the same room, but we've never actually had a conversation. And then when Adam said he would introduce you to me, he said, he just said Kate V. And so I was like, okay. And then when he connected us, I was like, oh, okay, I know who she is.
And there you go. And now we get to be connected. So I'm excited. And I'm excited to chat with you because you're an author, you're a podcaster, you write poetry, and so much of what we talk about on this show, which is probably why Adam connected us, is the creative process. We talk
Yes.
about the creative process. I love talking about writing and kind of what that journey is like for people. And you're an author, you're a writer, you're a poet. So when you think about some of the creative work that you're doing right now, your poetry, your writing, and your podcasting, is there one out of those three creative pursuits that you find more exciting or that you like spending your time on more?
Oh, good question. I'm currently working on a new book, so that's kind of exciting for me. But then the podcast, like I started that in July, I think, and so I'm fresh in there. Like I have experience being a guest or a co-host, but this is my first time actually being behind the driver's wheel of my podcast. So it's pretty exciting. I guess you could say that would be my favorite because once I get in my little virtual studio, it's a whole different vibe.
Ooh. So what when you so tell me about the vibe in the studio.
And so sometimes before I start a show, I'll put some music on, and I started writing blog posts that I turned into podcast episodes. But the last two, I've kind of done it the opposite. I just, had an idea and I sit and I think about it and I just, turn my music off and I get to it. I try to get into the place of, because my podcast is centered around encouraging people and inspiring people. So I get into a place where um, I feel like I'm actually talking to someone. Like I'm trying to pull out what's inside of people and try to get them to be the best versions of themselves. So it's like sometimes I'm just in a zone where I actually, like I said, feel like I'm talking to somebody.
Well, isn't that what they say? Like when you think about writing or podcasting, right? If you're doing a solo show, are some of the best advice that I've ever got about writing is to think about one person, like that one specific person, because when you think about that one specific person, you can get really clear and descriptive about what you're talking about, because you like are, especially when people think about questions that their friends are asking them or if their clients are asking them and you're answering that particular question. It's so fascinating to me that the more specific you can be, the more it resonates with more people, because you're hitting the right kind of person that's dealing with that exact same challenge.
Right. And I never, of course I experienced that with writing, because when I write, I'm just in a totally different zone altogether. I'm like, if I'm writing a poem or something and it has a particular scene that I want to create, I can actually see myself in that scene. But with the podcast, this was my first time ever doing one by myself. And I'm just kind of used to having like a conversation like we're having now. And I didn't, no one ever suggested that to pretend like I was talking to somebody. And so it was kind of weird at first, but after like the second or third episode, it just felt natural. I just, like you said, I just started pretending like I was talking to somebody, and I actually, could see the people that I was talking to, and I just got in that vein where somebody needs to hear this, what I'm saying, and what I'm saying is going to help somebody.
Yeah. So you said you used to write blog posts and turn them to podcasts, and now did you switch that? Are you now, like, is it really just off the cuff type stuff that you're podcasting on, and do you turn those into blog posts, or how does that work now?
Well, I haven't written the blog post yet. I think my last two episodes, the blog post didn't come first. I say that I'm going to do it because how it started was I have a blog post every Wednesday where I post a poem every Wednesday. And I've been doing that for about 4 years. And one day I just decided to kind of turn into more of a lifestyle blog. And so I would do one like once a month, and I was like, well, I could turn this into a podcast. And so that was how I started. But the last two, I had, something to talk about. And I was like, let me just go ahead and do this now. And I'll go back. I haven't done it yet. I do plan on doing it, but I just like you said, off the cuff, I just sat down and started recording.
That's so awesome. I love this because I think about this all the time in not just podcasting, but even like in videos. I go back and forth. Like I go back, like that's why I think I love this concept of live streaming, because I love live streaming because you have to do it, right? If you mess up, too bad, you keep going, right? It's
Right.
like you can't, like, so much of what stifles us in the creative process is perfectionism. And when you do live streaming, you're like, well, you kind of have to throw that out the window because it is what it is. And if you mess up, you have to just deal with it. But when I think about even creating videos, I there's something that I love about just turning on the camera and creating a video with a message that I want to share. But then I also think, oh my gosh, but I love sitting down and writing a script, because then I know I can be very clear and succinct. Like,
Hmm.
sometimes it takes 5 minutes if I just kind of go off the cuff to explain something that I know I could have said in 3 minutes had I just spent a little bit of time writing it. So I always go back and forth because I love both ideas, because part of me feels like, is it better to do the 5 minute video that just shows even a little bit of your thought process? Because do people like that? Do that resonate with them more? And so I don't know. I always go back and forth with that kind of create in the creation process?
Yeah, that's and I haven't figured out which one is better yet. I think my best advice would be to just probably just go with how you feel. Like sometimes with being creative, we try to lock ourselves, unintentionally into doing a certain thing. But as you know, once we start going, it changes. And then we go with the change. And then it's like, okay, well, which one did I like better? Um, do I want to do it with a script first or do I want to do it this way? Well, let's just kind of see how it goes. And that's just what I do. I'm just trying to see how it goes, trying to feel my way around because I've been a guest on a podcast for man a lot of times with one of my friends, Charlie, and he has a backyard pitmaster podcast that he just made me a co-host. So now I'm a co-host on that, and he loves to go live. So when we go live, it, like you said, it just forces you to do what you're supposed to do, and you don't have room for error. But when you're recording, because when I record, I sometimes I stop and then start over, or sometimes I'll let it play through. And so before I'm editing, it's a lot of me talking to myself and just like, oh, okay, and that takes a while to get all that edited out. But once you're live, you just have to go.
Yeah, I love live video. I do. I think live is so, in fact, I used to own a marketing agency, and one of the things that I did is I worked with small businesses and helped them use live video to grow their business, their local business. And I just think it's so, I don't know, there's something just really real about it. And
Yeah,
I enjoy hearing, I mean, I guess it also depends on the kind of show and the kind of podcast that you're creating, right? If you're
right.
teaching something very specific, then I think it's like, hey, get to the point. What are you teaching me? What are you doing? But when you're talking about the writing process or creative work, I think there's something really fascinating. I'm always fascinated to hear the reason behind why someone made the decision they made. Like, why did they go that direction? Why did they choose those words in their book or in their article or whatever it is that they're writing? So I guess it depends. But like I like your advice of, you know, sometimes you just gotta do what feels good and natural and
Yeah.
kind of see what happens with, how people respond. So have you always been a poet? When did poetry become an interest of yours?
I I'd always liked writing, and I became interested in poetry. It was one Black History Month. I learned about the Harlem Renaissance and Langston Hughes, and then I just instantly became a fan of poetry. And ever since then, it's just been my thing. I like poetry. I like to connect with poets, and it was a period where I actually stopped writing poetry altogether. And so when I published this book, that was kind of my return. And another thing, a lot of people didn't know that I wrote poetry. It was something I really didn't share with people. I don't think I really had a specific reason not to share with people. It was just something I just never really talked about. People knew that I liked to write and stuff like that, but as far as poetry, it was something that was very little known.
So when you started getting into it, what does that look like for you? Like, I guess like when you write today, how is your writing today different than from when you started? Like your
Oh, good
inspiration.
question. So writing today, I have a whole it's almost like painting on a canvas for me. I have an image in my mind, and depends on what type of music I'm listening to, I'm just in a place where the words just kind of flow. It's like sometimes I can see the words move, and sometimes the words take me to a place where I'm in the scene that I'm trying to create. And before, when I started writing, of course, being a child, I just tried to write everything, make sure that it rhymed. And some of the poems, didn't have a real purpose behind it. It was just, a bunch of words that kind of rhymed. And I really wasn't trying to create anything special. It was just like, okay, I can do this. I'm good with English, so I can make these words rhyme. I can make these words go together. But the writing process now, because the poems that I share on my blog are poems dedicated to love and poems dedicated to inspiration and things to encourage people. And so when I'm writing now, I feel a purpose behind it because I know that somebody's going to read it somewhere and it's going to help them. It's going to encourage them, especially with love. The books that I published, my first two books were about love because I felt there was a need to show like the beauty of love because a lot of people talk about love being hurt and pain and all these different things. But I'm like, wait a minute, this love is a beautiful thing. And I wanted to write poems to express that and show that. So that people could look at love for what it truly is. So when I'm writing now, I'm writing to get a message across, to get a feeling across, to take people to a place where they've probably never been before or a place that they've been and forgotten.
Oh, a place they've been and forgotten. I love that. What you obviously have such a passion for talking about love and bringing love into the world. I mean, I love your mission. It's a beautiful one. Is that is that something that you've just always had, or did you experience something in your past that really kind of got you more interested in sharing and spreading that kind of message?
Well, I've always been a fan of love. That's something that's never been a secret. It just when I started writing these poems and sharing them, it was just, I don't know, it was more of an expression. Um, well, let me back up. How I actually started sharing my poems was one day I was talking to my wife, and I don't even know if we were dating at the time. We might have just been friends, but that was during that point where I wasn't writing my poetry out. Like I would create a poem in my mind and never really write it out. So I was talking to her one day about it, and I told her I had this poem in my head, and she was like, "Well, that's a good place for it." And so I was like, "Oh, okay." And so that night, I finished the poem and sent it to her. She read it, and then finishing that poem, I started to, I guess, rekindle my love for writing it, like actually writing it out. I wanted to do a few poems to kind of tell like a story, like kind of like a love story, but like a day to day sort of thing. But then the more I wrote, the more it turned into something else. And so I guess having that conversation and then, our relationship and now our marriage has helped me develop into writing about love and from a personal experience more than just an outward experience.
Does your wife read your poetry?
Yes, it's been times she reads them to me and I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty good. And she's like, well, yeah, you wrote it. And I'm like, whoa, I wrote it.
Isn't that funny as a writer when you can step away from your work and then you read something and sometimes you're like, no, this is horrible. And sometimes you're like, I'm brilliant.
Right.
It's such a process. I think writing is such an interesting, it's so there's something about it that I just love and hate at the same time. It's sitting down to write. Sometimes I really feel like it and I can't wait and I get so excited. And other times I feel like it's so hard to sit down and I get so too in my head.
Yes.
But what's so fascinating is the only way to get over that is to start writing. Like once you start writing, I feel like you get that excitement. You get that feeling of, "Ooh, what can I do? What's going to show up? What's going to come out today?" And the more that you write, what is so fascinating is that you can go back to something that you created that is horrible and make it better, but you can't do anything with a blank page. So
Oh, I love that. Yes.
have to keep doing it, right?
Right. And that's something I always talk to people about because, of course, when people learn that I'm a writer, we have conversations and they're like, well, I thought about writing a book, but I don't know. And I'm like, well, just write. Just get your ideas out and just sit down, write. Once you start, everything will just come out. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to um, be a scholar or a grammar expert. Just write it out, get it out of your mind, get it down on paper. And everybody that I've had that conversation with so far, they've written stuff that they didn't think they could write. They started with a couple of sentences and then they just kept going and going and going.
Oh, I love it. I love that. And it's almost like you just have to. I was just talking to a friend of mine today. She's a writer, she's an editor, she does all the things. She's in that business. And we were talking. I said, I think as a writer, well, I love to read and
Mhm.
read. If you love to write, you love to read. I feel like that's just kind of the way that it goes
Yeah.
for the most part. But when I discovered that this was just a normal part of the process is when I started reading books like Bird by Bird and On Writing by Stephen King and other. Oh, you know, a book I just finished that is like my new favorite book about writing is Several Short Sentences About Writing by Verlin Klinkenberg.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Terrance, it's so good. You're going to love it. It's like one of the best books on writing. And it is, oh, this was one of the lines that I highlighted that I just keep thinking about in my head as I'm writing. It just keeps coming up for me. He says, knowing what you're trying to say is always important, but knowing what you've actually said is crucial.
Oh, yeah.
Boom, right?
Yeah.
It's so interesting how you write something and in your head you have all this knowledge, you have all the context behind what you're trying to say, and we forget that unless you're saying it really simply. In fact, in this book, one of the things that he really talks about is how a lot of writers, we want to sound smart, right? We
Yes.
use big words and sound smart, but really what we should do is keep sentences short, simple. And now that's for kind of, if you're writing a book. If you're writing poetry, it's a lot different. But I found, oh, it's such a great book. I was just like devouring it. I need to read it again. I will probably read this book like many times this year because it just has so much richness for writers. So if you want to be a better writer, if you're listening, definitely check out that book. It's awesome. Who are some of your what are some of your favorite books and inspiration?
I one of my favorite authors, he's a poet as well. He writes more like young adult, but I like Jason Reynolds. I like his style. Um, I mostly read like informational books and I'm trying to get back into fictional books, but the last couple of years I've been reading books like right now, I'm reading the seven. What is it? 7 Steps for Highly Effective
Oh,
People.
The Seven Habits of Highly
You
Effective.
have yes, I'm reading that. I also looked into what's the other one? The Four Agreements.
Oh, so good.
So it's books like that. But Jason Reynolds, he's a fiction author, and like I said, he writes young adult books and things like that. So I'm trying to get back into fiction now because I realized that being a writer, I've been reading like more serious stuff and maybe I need to kind of get back into reading fiction and stuff because I love fiction growing up, but I just got to a point when I got older, I guess I felt like I need to read more, serious things. But I realized that I might be missing out and I need to tap into more things, which is crazy because that's something I tell people too. I like, if you're looking at magazines, try to pick a magazine that you don't normally read because you might find something to inspire you there. If you read a certain kind of book, try to read a different kind of book because you might find some inspiration there. But here it is, I am just sitting here reading books like that instead of reading fiction, which was my first love when it came to reading.
Isn't that always the way, Terrance? We're so good at giving advice. We're not always so good at taking our own advice.
No, not
But that is really good advice. And I'm glad, it's funny you say that, because this year I challenged myself, because I'm the same way. Like I run a coaching company. So I am all about personal development books, right? Like I've been reading those for over 20 years. And I this year especially, I keep trying to. I keep trying. I say I keep trying. I don't try that hard, clearly, because I don't do it like year after year. I I really do say I'm going to read more fiction, and then I read fiction. And I'm like, oh, it's like a fun. Like it's fun. Instead of like watching a show, like you read a book. It's a fiction book. It kind of gets you out of your world, and I really like that. But this year, I challenged myself to read books I normally wouldn't read, in the sense of biographies. So I love reading biographies and autobiographies. I love Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, and Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger, and The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Like I like a lot of business, like entrepreneurial fiction, or not
okay.
books, like autobiographies. And so I decided, I'm like, look, you have to read other things, like other people, right? And so I read The Storyteller by Dave Grohl, who is in Foo Fighters.
Okay.
I'm not a huge Foo Fighter fan, but obviously Dave. Did I say Steve Grohl? Dave Grohl. I don't know. Whoever I said, it's Dave Grohl. Anyway, that's what happens when you're live. But so I read his book, and so good. So far, I think this year it's my favorite book that I've read this year, because it's called The Storyteller for a reason. And
Yeah.
it's because he is an incredible storyteller, and man, does he have great stories just about the time that he fell off stage and broke his leg, and he continued to do his concert, or when Tom Petty reached out to him to perform with him on Saturday Night Live. I mean, just incredible stories. And I thought, see, this is why I need to expand my horizons and read about people that maybe I don't even really know that much about them, and they're in a completely different industry, but they're at the top of their game in
Right.
their industry. And that inspired me in so many ways, even though I am in no way a musician. And so I love that you give that advice to people. Now you just need to take it, Terrance.
Yeah, I need I need to start taking my own advice. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny how we do things like that. And I think being a person that's always trying to encourage people and always trying to lift people up, it's like I'm so used to giving the advice, and I've been told that it's good advice. I always get good feedback, but then sometimes you forget about yourself. You just like, and then sometimes people will use the same words you gave them, and then it's like, oh man, that's some really good advice. And like, yeah, you should think so. You told me that, and it's like, oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. It's so true. All right. So, what are you most excited about working on this year? What are you most excited about creating?
This new book that I'm working on, I'm very excited about it because I want to include some short stories, and it's taking the direction way different from where I intended. So it's making it more exciting because I don't know where it's going, but it's flowing so well, and all these different ideas are coming up. So I'm really excited about that. I want to incorporate some pictures in this book. I really want to just let all of my creativity out into this book. I want it to be sort of like an anthology, something that just resonates with everyone. It's going to be, because like I said, my first two books were poetry books about love, but this one is going to be more like lifestyle and from a male perspective, and being a black man, from my perspective of the world and stuff, and not just my story but everyone's story, and stories that are uplifting, stories that hopefully educate and things like that. So I'm really, really excited about it because not intentionally, but of course, my first two books, the audience was mostly women. Of course, when you're talking about love, so I want to kind of break into something that more people and everybody will be more likely to read and pick up.
That's cool. What when you think about wanting to have a new audience read and be excited about that book, how do you think about it differently in the perspective of, gosh, I can't even believe I'm going to say this because we're talking about creativity, and I'm turning it over to marketing, because I'm thinking, how do you think through that when you're like, okay, my first two books were very much geared towards women talking about love, and now you're wanting this kind of newer audience to pick up on this creative work? How do you think about that when you're creating it, and also like how to share it with the world?
That's a very good question. My thought is to just start sharing little pieces of it, and I can't believe I'm going to say this. Probably even go live or
Yes.
create some videos. Because I want to stretch myself to do things that I normally wouldn't do. And so I want to create some videos for this, something to kind of get people excited about it. I want to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I want to just keep pushing myself and keep going, in the different directions that like I said, that I've been in before. Going live on like Instagram and Facebook, that's something I've never done. Well, on my own, I've been on somebody else's live, but I want to kind of, do stuff on my own and not just jump in to support people. So hopefully I can get some videos together, some sort of sharing a couple pieces here and there, and hopefully that'll get people excited about it and bring in this new audience.
Not hopefully, you are going to do it.
You're right. Yes.
So let's actually, Terrance, this is what we should do. Look at your calendar. You're going to do a live. You're going to schedule an Instagram live. When are you
Okay.
doing your first live? We got to get it on tape. We got to get
We got
this on video. This is proof. You
um
need to give yourself a deadline, or you're never going to do it.
you're right. Before the end of March. How about that?
Before the end of March. Before the end of March? That is so long from now.
Okay. Before March 15th. How about that? That's
Can we all notice that Terrance is not giving a date? He just wants to say before. All right, before March 15th, you will do a live. You're still giving yourself a full month. You realize that?
yes, yes, yes.
All right. I'll allow it, but I don't like it.
Well, now I have some accountability because everybody's going to be looking for it.
That's right. You need to do this live. And I will say, if you want to go, if you do want to go live on Instagram and you want me to go live with you, I would totally do that. But
Okay.
know that you're doing it. I know you want to do it on your own, which I think is better, much better. But I'll just put it out there just because it'll be, we can talk about you put yourself out there and do a live.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this is a big challenge for a lot of people, right? This is why I'm so passionate about doing this kind of show, because I think it's so interesting to hear from other people that are going through their own creative journey and they're putting their work out in the world, right? Like, you have written 2 books, you're writing another one, you do these beautiful poems and you share them, and yet we all have this something that's kind of stopping us from doing some other type of creative work that we really want to do. And I think it's important to kind of like highlight that, and also talk through, how do you overcome it? How do you push past that fear? How do you push past the, oh, I don't know if it's going to work, or am I going to look stupid, or all of those pieces, right?
Right. Yeah. That's a very good point, because it's so weird. Like with like the whole live thing is kind of awkward to me, but I'm a person who I'm used to talking to people face to face. I'm used to having conversations with people face to face. And, with the whole pandemic thing, it kind of has me in a weird place because, we had to stay away from people. And I've just been so used to I'm the person, instead of making a phone call, like a customer service phone call, I'd rather go to the place. and have a conversation with the associate face to face. I'm that type of person. And so having to go virtual and do all these different things, it seems like it should be easier, but for some strange reason, it's not. I would think that someone would feel more uncomfortable talking to somebody face to face and then being on the phone or being on, on a live stream or something like that. But it's I don't know.
No, it's much harder being live because you're talking to yourself basically, because nobody is giving you feedback. No, you can't see anybody. So you're like,
Right.
hey, is this thing on? Does anybody care? Like, it's just a whole different, not everybody is comfortable getting on camera and talking to essentially nobody.
Right.
So
Good point.
so but that's the thing, is like, just like anything else, we were talking about the writing process. You have to just write. You talk about, doing live video. The more that you do it, the more comfortable that you get, but you will never get comfortable if you just keep putting it off. You'll never get comfortable just practicing behind the scenes. You actually have to press the go live button and actually do it.
Right.
And I think, again, it just goes back to, that's what I love about what we did today, right? We were like, hey, we're just going to
Yes.
try it out. We'll see what happens and go from there. Terrance, I always ask my guests to share one activity, one exercise that they can do in 10 minutes or less, something real easy that will kind of push them out of their creativity comfort zone.
That's a good question. 10 minutes or less. I would say maybe go to maybe a room in your house or maybe even outside, someplace where you're not so much uncomfortable, but someplace where you don't really spend much time, and sit there with a pad and a pen and just close your eyes and sit and think. It could be about anything. Hopefully, it's positive thoughts, but if it's something that you need to get off your chest, then that's fine. And just sit there for a few moments, taking a couple of deep breaths, and just start writing.
I love it. I love it. Just start writing.
Just start.
That's it.
Because I feel like we all have books in us of some kind. We all have something in us that somebody else needs. We all have words inside of us that somebody else needs to either read or hear. And so the first way to get that out is to just write. And some people make the excuse of, I don't have time to write. I don't have time to this and that. Okay, well, if the activity that I gave, sitting down and writing, if that seems like it's, a little too much for you, then turn on the voice recorder and start talking, because you can always transcribe those into pages and pages, and it could be a book. Because I've heard of a lot of people who've written books and they've never actually written anything down. They just talked into a voice recorder and then they transcribed it, and then here comes this book. So I would like for everybody to sit down and write, but if you don't feel comfortable doing that, just record your voice and get it out, because you have something inside you that someone needs to hear. It's something inside of all of us that somebody needs to hear.
I love that. And yes, I agree. I think most people, everyone's got a book in them. Not everyone's going to write a book, but everyone's got stories. And
Yes.
I love that idea of just sitting down and write freely. Don't judge, no judgment in your writing. No one has to look at it. And guess what? You can rip it up and throw it away if you want. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could.
Right.
Oh my gosh, Terrance, it was such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Good, good, good. Well, we will stay connected, and I'm going to hold you accountable to your live
Yes.
before March 15th.
Okay. And I'll make sure I keep you posted. So I'm
Yes.
gonna do my part as well.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. You are awesome. We will talk soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being part of this first live stream here on YouTube that I've done in a while. And you can check out the podcast on audio. We submit we get out an episode every Monday morning it comes out. And so if you want to go subscribe over there, that would be awesome. If you like this content, I hope you enjoyed what Terrance had to say, and definitely take him up on the challenge of writing. And I know not everybody can sit down and write. Sometimes we just need a journaling prompt or something. And I actually created a journaling book with the Create for No Reason logo on top, and it has 77 journaling prompts to gain clarity and inspire action. And so you can actually get it over on Amazon if you're interested. If you're a big journaler, then you might really like the book. So you can get it over on Amazon. I will put the link in the description below. Thank you again. And I'm going to do this more, being able to live stream the podcast. So Terrance, I'm appreciative of him for being my first guest, and more to come. And everyone have a great day. And as I say always on the podcast, until next time, go create something.